If you ever look at anything that is pop culture and successful, probably came from a gay person. When you've been hurt and you can tap into your heart or your soul, that probably is very powerful to be able to create. So in the 80s and the 90s in New York, imagine that there are people who come out and they get thrown out by their families. They found themselves surrounded by people just like them. So they moved in physically to a house or an apartment together, and usually there was a mother or a father. That's what they called them. They were the head of the household. But none of these people were physically related to each other. They were all just outcasts, had nowhere to go, and they suddenly created a family. Well, these houses would start competing in these competitions for dance and music and costumes. Regular people started going, what is this voguing? Where did it come from? It came from these competitions. They would do what they could with whatever they had, and it was creative. And guess what? Fashion icons would go and get costume designs. It inspired music, it inspired dance. So just in that outlet of outcasts comes creativity. It's driven by this abuse, but funneled through art. I think what's sad about my generation is when you came out, it was surrounded by alcohol, and you definitely needed some courage to get up in there, right? You couldn't just show up at the bar, you had to have a few drinks, and then of course you were there and you were dancing with your friends, and then maybe you met somebody who you were sexually attracted to when you drink more. When I first came out, you went to a gay bar with dancing, drinking, and ultimately trying to hook up with somebody. That seemed to be sort of the formula. There were these guys who would come in from out of town with cement blocks and just throw them at fags and queers and leave them for dead. People would go out and go gay bashing. That's what they called it, gay bashing. It was fun for people to be in the back of a truck to hurt somebody. And yet, we boys, girls, were just wanting to have some fun with people that were like us and try to figure out who we are. And when I first came out, there were no gay pride flags. My first marches or prides in the 80s were down Peachtree, and there were protests. There weren't floats and go-go boys and music. They were boys like me and girls. I don't even think we had the spectrum of LGBTQ+. There was no such thing. And we were marching, and I remember marching down Peachtree Street on a Sunday, and the churches were holding their children and they're waving Bibles at us. That was when I walked past my current church, which is St. Mark, sometimes known as the Gay Church on 5th and Peachtree. And some of the ladies there were actually giving out water. It's known as the Miracle on Peachtree Street, to open that church to everybody. There was no pride about it. It was actually probably more fear than pride that I felt when I was growing up. I waited tables. Everybody would go to Colony Square and eat brunch. Gay boys would be waiting tables, and there were a lot of us, but I remember in the 80s, AIDS had first come out, and it was called AIDS. It wasn't HIV. There were no medicines. They didn't know what it was. I remember this one guy was sick. We didn't know what he was sick from. It was the flu, the gay flu. They thought it was poppers. Nobody knew what AIDS or HIV was then. But there were a couple of these guys that literally left and died. They never came back. I met this beautiful man named Stephen Flora, and he was gay. And at 14, parents threw him out, never spoke to him again at 14. And in those days, in the early 80s, it was one of the most beautiful dates I'd ever been on. I think it's the Bank of America Tower now. It used to be called the IBM Tower, the tallest building in Atlanta. He took me there because he worked for a company that ultimately would fire him because they found out he was gay. And he told me that night that he had this sickness. And I remember telling him that we could only be friends. And even as an adult now, I look back with a lot of sadness because I was afraid. But we were all afraid of what this was. But this beautiful man had it and wanted to be with me intimately. And I said, I can't. He died at 24 at Grady, our county hospital, blind, and all by himself. That was what the 1980s would look like for me in Atlanta, and trying to be comfortable and explore what love might feel like, what your sexual identity might feel like, but always underneath that, terrified. I lived literally a block from Christopher Street in Manhattan, so it was nice to be in an epicenter of gay men. It was nice to be around like-minded people where You didn't have to explain that you were gay. My first real relationship, I met someone at the gym, really handsome guy. He was in theater also, and we flirted. And I remember waiting outside the gym. I finished before him, so I sat outside with my phone number. And in those days, there weren't cell phones. There were services. As an actor, you had a service. So he called my service and left a message that he wanted to do something. And it was like a proper date. We were going to dinner as two gay men in a city that it was okay to do that. And then the other stuff after that just sort of fell into place. At his apartment, they knew who I was, and it was okay. Being introduced as a boyfriend, doing holidays and vacations. That's the stuff that when I think about relationships to me that matter, it's not about, I say this all the time to people, stop picturing what I'm doing in my bedroom. Yes, I'm gay. I just said I'm gay, but you don't need to start thinking of the acts that I'm doing. That's none of your business. But people do, right? They all go, oh, he's gay, so wonder who he's seeing. Is he the top or is he the bottom? Or is he the this or the that? I'm like, it's none of your business. I hope you're having as much sex as you want to. That's what I say to people. And I think you should think the same thing about me. But at those times they would see us together and they're just like, okay, this is a nice couple. They're buying groceries and going to the gym. It's not all about all the seedy sex we're having, because we're not. When I was growing up, my sister and I were not members of a church. My family wasn't, but every once in a while a bus would come by on Sunday. My sister and I would go to a church. It may not even be the same church. I think my sister and I may hold the world's record for being saved, because I think we got saved by every church. At the end, I'm like, oh, the music's really loud. Do you feel the Spirit of the Lord? If you do, come walk up front. And my sister and I did. We'd hold hands and go, do you feel it? And she's like, yeah, I feel it. So we'd walk up front. And then on Wednesday, these Christians would come to my parents' house, the heathens who weren't in church with their children, and go, your children got saved. They're like, oh, they do that all the time. So I didn't grow up like understanding the Bible. You knew that church was good. I think that's probably what I could hang my hat on, that church was a good thing and that's where good people went. However, now I know that that's not always true, that there are some hateful Christians. There is abuse in the church. There's molestation in church. There's gossip in church. There's politics in church. It isn't all great. No, it's not. Because you're dealing with people. And people are inherently flawed. But what I do think the Bible is intended for us as adults is hopefully to give us some guideposts about how to live your life. I'm very proud to be a gay Christian. It is possible. So yes, it's possible. Where it's okay to love whoever you want. And so I was always sort of part of what I call the performance. Like I was a singer in the choir or did special performances. The music made me feel a certain way. And that I knew early on that I liked it and I needed it. And so I always think that music has fueled my soul. Now it is 2023. We're living in a time and a place that should be accepting of all people. And even as a Christian man, to be able to put that piece as part of the puzzle, there is just one simple message in the Bible, and it's to love. That's it. And there is no one that should or could take that away from me. And I, as a Christian, would never want to take that away from you. It's that simple. And there's also Only Christian Love. If you read that book, there's no taught of Christian hatred. What I've learned is you cannot take the Bible literally. They are beautiful stories. And if we tried to apply them, a very old book, to 2023, we're probably going to run into a bit of discord. So those people who want to twist words and say that men shouldn't sleep with men, well, I can find you another quote, having studied the Bible from cover to cover for 2 years, to show you a companion note about Jesus loving the unfortunate prostitutes, tax collectors, and the unlovable. There is a phrase for every one that you want to give me. I will find you a counter phrase. But the one that I will always go back to is that Jesus and God only intend there to be love. And that's it. So the hateful Christians who think that I'm not going to heaven, you're wrong. Those hateful Christians who think they could hurt us, beat us, no. And I also know this, that no one, no matter who you are, can ever take or interrupt my faith. That's mine. Mine alone with God. And I think it's unfortunate because I think a lot of LGBTQ plus individuals grew up in some form of church and probably have a bad experience or taste in their mouth of what it was like for them. And I would say to all those people, there is a place for you, a loving place for you somewhere. And in Atlanta, my church, which is St. Mark, welcomes all. The doors are open to every single person. You don't have to be a Christian. You just need to have the desire to come in and be surrounded by love. That's it. And if you want to join or you want to be baptized, all that's up to you. But I will safely say that the Bible is intended for everybody, and being a Christian is intended for everybody. And those people who think differently, it's all about love. Finally accepting all of it and being me, it's taken me a lifetime to be able to talk about it from growing up in the 60s and 70s. Just that in and of itself is a journey of a lifetime. And then to be an active participant is completely different because some people sit on the sidelines. And it's also time that we have people that look like me in politics and openly gay, who do film and are openly gay, who are entertainers and openly gay, to realize it's just part of their superpower. They're also really remarkable human beings. Get out of their bedrooms. Yes, they're having sex. Stop thinking about what they're doing. They're just amazing people. And why shouldn't human sexuality just be what it is? It is normal. It's normal and loving, and we want people to have sex. It's normal for people just like me, not just for the heterosexual people. We are not free to love all the time. We're not. And that's hard. That's also a hard pill to swallow because we want. And at its essence, I think that's all we want. That's it. We just want to love and be loved. That's it. And hopefully one day we'll get there. And I look at my own lifetime and it is possible. I mean, just to go back about talking about gay prides, they were marches and now they're full-on celebrations and they have businesses and people can bring their kids, and I hope they remain safe. But if it is that we finally adopt that there's a spectrum that people can be and that's good, maybe that's where it will go. And maybe that's not something that I can fully embrace because I came from a different generation where you were girl or boy, you were gay or you were lesbian. Those were kind of or you were single. You were that uncle who lived in the attic. I'm kidding. But there weren't choices, right? But now there are all these choices. And there are lots of people who come out later in life. But I also think that too is about having the ability to self-assess. We now have language, LGBTQ plus communities or non-binary or a spectrum. The sheer fact that there has now a language that I spoke about earlier when I was coming out, there wasn't a language that we could get on board that was positive. Now there is positivity in understanding where you might be on some sexual spectrum. I think now it probably is easier for people to come out or to try lots of things on. My fear for a lot of our young people is how they choose. Or do you just remain on a spectrum for the rest of your life and that's fluid and that's okay? I honestly don't know the answer to that because I'm 58. I grew up in a very different time, but I sometimes jokingly think, are there going to be more letters to the LGBTQ plus? I've often wanted to go ... because this is never going to end. I jokingly say that, but I'm glad that there is the space for people to find out who they are and who they're attracted to. I think that pride is intended to give everybody a place, and that those colors are a place for everybody and to feel welcomed as opposed to being excluded. I don't like thinking that hard times in anyone's upbringing makes them who they are, but it can't not be part of your fabric, right? It's my story, that's what happened. And so as an adult now, do I look back on all that to go, did it shape me into who I am? Yeah, it did. And was it hard? Yeah, it was hard. You have to fight a lot in life. Like in coming from where I came from and trying to survive being a little kid. You gotta pick up a sword all the time. You gotta fight. If you're gonna be successful or you're gonna win, you gotta fight a lot. As you get older, there's some grace about going, maybe you don't have to fight. There comes this feeling where you can just stop, breathe, and just be. There's grace in that. And that's the marriage of my sexuality, my sexual preference, my identity, me being a Christian, me being a son, me being a student, me being a neighbor. I'm not just this or that. I'm literally every bit of that, all wrapped up into one. And if you just breathe, you can go, I'm comfortable in all this. It just takes some of us maybe a lifetime to get there.